You think you know this place. You have seen the photographs, the white stone, the ravens, the tourists with their cameras pressed against iron fences, trying to feel something through the glass. But they are looking at a corpse, a preserved, scrubbed, emptied corpse. The Tower of London that exists today is a museum of itself, clean, curated, safe. The Tower of London that existed in the 1300s was none of those things. It was loud, it smelled, it was full, desperately, chaotically full, of living people going about the bloody, grinding daily business of survival inside the walls of England's most powerful structure. They were not prisoners, most of them. They were soldiers, craftsmen, mint workers, animal keepers, servants. Children born within these walls who would grow old and die within these walls without ever leaving by choice. This is not the story of the men who lost their heads here. This is the story of the people who lived here and what it cost them. Step inside. It is before dawn. The Thames is black and cold outside the walls, and you can hear it. Not see it, but hear it. A low, constant drag of water against stone that you have slept next to your entire life. You stopped noticing it years ago, the way you stop noticing anything that never goes away. You are a soldier, a member of the permanent tower garrison under the constable of the tower, which means you do not fight battles. You guard walls. You stand in rain. You rotate through watches that divide the night into sections of cold and colder. This morning, like every morning, you rise before the bell. Not because you are disciplined, because the man sleeping 3 inches from your left shoulder has elbowed you awake, and the man on your right is already pulling on his boots in the dark, and there is no concept of privacy in the garrison quarters of the Tower of London in 1315. You are stacked into rooms like cordwood. 40 men sharing a space designed, if it was designed at all, for considerably fewer. You dress in the dark. You do not wash. There is no facility for washing, and no expectation of it. You pull on wool that has been on your body for a number of consecutive days you have stopped counting. And then you step outside. And this is what nobody tells you about the Tower of London. It is not empty. It has never been empty. At peak occupation in the early 1300s, the Tower of London was home to somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 people, living, working, breathing, eating, and dying within its walls. Soldiers, smiths, mint workers striking the king's coin in round-the-clock shifts, wardens and their families, the menagerie keepers managing animals that had no business being in England, clerks copying documents by candlelight until their fingers locked, priests saying mass in a chapel that smelled of wet stone and tallow. You step outside into that world every morning, and it hits you like a fist. You are one of roughly 100 permanent soldiers garrisoned at the tower, under the command of the constable, a royal appointment that carried enormous prestige and very little actual labor. The constable ate well. You did not. The records of the tower's daily maintenance costs, preserved in the patent rolls and the close rolls of the early 14th century, show garrison rations running to a level historians describe, with considerable diplomacy, as adequate for survival. What this means in practice: bread, ale, and occasional meat. The bread was dark. The ale was weak. Weaker than what you could buy outside the walls, but safer, because the water inside the tower was not safe. The well inside the inner ward drew from a water table contaminated by everything above it, by everything produced by 1,000 people living inside a fortification with no drainage system designed for 1,000 people. You drink ale because drinking the water is a death sentence administered slowly. Your duties rotate through 5 categories: gate watch, wall walk, night patrol, escort duty for prisoners, and what the tower records simply call general labor. General labor means whatever needs doing. It means carrying timber. It means shoveling. It means standing in a courtyard for 4 hours in February because a senior warden decided someone should stand in that courtyard for 4 hours in February. And today it is you. You sleep in the Garrison barracks in the outer ward, a room documented by historian Simon Thurley in his architectural study of the medieval tower as measuring approximately 60 feet by 18 feet. 60 feet. 18 feet. For 40 men, plus their equipment, their bedding, their personal stores of food they have scrounged, bought, or stolen, and the general accumulation of human material that gathers in any enclosed space where people live for years without the means or the expectation of removing it. The smell of the Garrison quarters in the Tower of London in 1315 is something you have entirely stopped perceiving. Visitors, and visitors do come, official visitors, inspectors, and clerks, sometimes stop in the doorway. You watch them. You've learned to recognize the expression, the slight pause, the controlled breath. You do not have the luxury of pausing. This is your life, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. For as long as the constable has need of you, which is to say, for as long as you live or until you are discharged, which almost never happens once you are inside. Some of the men in your barracks have been here for 11 years. One has been here for 17. He does not speak much about the world outside the walls. Stay with me. Because the Garrison is only a fraction of the population of this place, and the people I have not yet described are the ones living in conditions the soldiers would have considered an improvement. The Tower of London in the 1300s is surrounded by a moat. You know this. Everyone knows this. The moat, in the popular imagination, is a romantic feature, part of the castle aesthetic, the drawbridge and portcullis theatre of medieval fortification. What the popular imagination does not tell you is what the moat contained. The tower moat, by the early 14th century, functioned as the primary waste disposal system for everyone living inside the walls. Every latrine shaft in the tower, and there were dozens, built into the walls at multiple levels, drained either into the Thames or into the moat. Every animal pen, every kitchen drain, everything produced by 1,000 human bodies and the considerable number of non-human bodies the tower also housed, discharged into that water. In 1281, the moat had become so choked with waste that sections of the outer wall were structurally compromised. The records of Edward I's building works, studied extensively by historian R. Allen Brown, note payments to workers specifically for clearing the ditch, a euphemism covering the removal of compacted human and animal waste from a moat that had, in places, essentially solidified. You walk past this moat every day. In summer, when the Thames is low and the wind comes from the south, you do not walk past it. You move through it. The smell enters you. It coats the inside of your throat. New soldiers, men fresh from outside, from the city, from villages, sometimes vomit. Within a fortnight, they stop. Not because it gets better, because the human body will adapt to almost anything if you give it no alternative. But here is something almost no one tells you about medieval sanitation, and it may surprise you. The people inside the tower cared about cleanliness. Medieval chronicler Jean Froissart, describing noble households of the period, documents regular bathing as a social ritual, an expectation of civilized life. The tower's own royal apartments, the chambers reserved for when the king was in residence, included documented provisions for heated bathing water, scented with herbs. The king bathed. You did not. Not because you did not want to, but because the only water available to a Garrison soldier in the Tower of London was either contaminated well water or water drawn from the Thames at a point approximately 40 feet downstream from where the tower's own waste entered it. Caring about being clean and having any means of achieving it are two entirely different things when the infrastructure itself is working against you at every level. The smell you carry on your body is not negligence. It is the logical output of a system that was never designed to keep you clean. It was designed to keep you useful. And we have not yet gotten to the animals. Not even close. In 1235, Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II sent King Henry III 3 leopards as a diplomatic gift. You might think this is irrelevant to your life as a Tower Garrison soldier in 1315. It is not. Because those 3 leopards were the beginning of the Royal Menagerie, a collection of exotic animals housed inside the Tower of London that by the early 14th century included lions, a polar bear, an elephant, and a rotating cast of animals sent by foreign monarchies to demonstrate their wealth and their access to the impossible. The menagerie occupied the area of the Lion Tower at the western entrance of the tower complex. This is not a separate facility. It is not a zoo set apart from the living quarters. It is built into the same wall system, the same courtyard network, the same enclosed space where you eat and sleep and stand your watch. The lion cages stood approximately 80 feet from the Garrison cookhouse, according to the structural surveys compiled by historian Daniel Hahn in his study of the Royal Menagerie. 80 feet. On a still morning, you do not need to see them to know they are there. The polar bear, documented in the tower records as receiving a daily ration of fish and a long chain that allowed it to fish in the Thames, was kept in conditions that the menagerie keeper's own accounts describe as increasingly difficult to manage as the bear aged. A polar bear in the Thames in 1315, chained to a tower wall in a city that reaches temperatures the animal was never designed to tolerate. The accounts record the keeper requesting additional fish rations in summer months. The bear's behavior is described, in the bureaucratic language of the tower records, as unsettled. Unsettled is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. The animal deaths were regular. The disposal of a dead lion or a dead elephant, the elephant documented as arriving in 1255 and requiring its own specially constructed house, was added to the general labor roster. This meant it was added to yours. You have helped move a dead big cat across a cobblestone courtyard at 3 in the morning. You remember the weight. You remember the smell, which was different from the smell of the moat, different from the smell of the Garrison quarters, different from anything you had encountered before or wished to encounter again. This is not something they mention in the king's proclamations about the glory of his menagerie, but we have still not reached the worst of it. The worst of it is underground. Below the tower, or more precisely, within its walls, in chambers designed for no other purpose, the Royal Mint operated continuously from 1279 onward, striking the coin of the realm. You are not a soldier anymore. You are a mint worker, and your situation is, in every measurable way, worse. The Mint employed between 60 and 100 workers at peak operation under Edward I, according to historian Nicholas Mayhew's study of medieval English coinage. These workers, smiths, hammermen, assayers, operated in enclosed chambers where silver was melted, alloyed, hammered into blanks, and struck into pennies. Round the clock, in rotating shifts, because the king's financial needs did not pause for darkness or weather, or the condition of the men producing his currency. The temperature inside the mint chambers during active smelting ran high enough to make the air shimmer. You work 6 inches from a furnace that burns continuously. Your face is permanently red. The skin on your forearms, closest to the heat, has developed a texture you no longer examine. But the heat is not what kills mint workers. What kills mint workers is the lead. Medieval silver coin was routinely alloyed with lead to adjust its composition. The smelting process released lead vapor into enclosed, poorly ventilated chambers. The men working those furnaces inhaled it daily. Historian Mayhew's analysis of medieval mint records documents a pattern of shortened working careers among senior hammermen, men who simply stopped appearing in the wage rolls after a number of years, replaced without comment by younger names. Lead poisoning, undiagnosed and unnamed in the 1300s, but present in those gaps in the records with absolute consistency. Your hands shake slightly in the morning. They have for the last 2 years. You assume it is the cold. You are paid reasonably well, better than the Garrison soldiers, better than the menagerie keepers. The Tower Mint wages, documented in the exchequer rolls, show senior assayers earning enough to support a family within the walls, which is where your family lives. Your wife, your 2 children, born inside these walls. Your eldest has never been more than half a mile from the place of her birth. She does not know anything different. Neither anymore do you. The Tower of London is still standing. They maintain it carefully. They clean the stone. They label the rooms. They tell you where Anne Boleyn walked, where Thomas More was held, where the axe came down. They do not have a label for the barracks room, where 40 men slept in 60 feet of darkness. They do not have a marker for the spot where the mint workers stood for the last time, before their hands shook too hard to hold the hammer. The famous dead of the tower are remembered because power remembered them, to celebrate their fall, to justify their ending. The ordinary living of the tower are not remembered, because power had no use for their memory. They woke inside those walls every morning. They worked, they smelled, they fed lions and struck coin and drank weak ale instead of poisoned water, and called it a life, because it was the only life available to them. And they did not think of themselves as forgotten. They were simply there. Inside the walls of the most powerful building in England, invisible to every record that was not a wage roll or a ration ledger. Buried, not in the ground, in the ordinary. These are the stories buried in the past.